Admiral Zarthak stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominator's Will, watching the blue marble that humans called Earth spin lazily below. His four arms were crossed in the traditional Vexani pose of supreme confidence, while his scales shimmered with anticipation. Around him, the bridge crew of various alien species worked at their stations, preparing for what they all believed would be the easiest conquest in the Galactic Empire's history. "Status report," Zarthak commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 47 worlds. "All fleets are in position, Admiral," replied Commander Klex, an insectoid hive-tar whose mandibles clicked nervously. 2,000 ships surrounding the planet. Ground forces ready for deployment. The humans appear to be mobilizing their primitive armies. Zarthak let out what passed for laughter among his species, a low rumbling sound that made the bridge vibrate. The intelligence reports had been thoroughly entertaining. These humans, despite their recent entry into galactic awareness, insisted on clinging to their ancient chemical-based weapons. While the rest of the galaxy had moved on to plasma rifles, ion cannons, and antimatter weapons, centuries ago, humans still fired little metal projectiles powered by controlled explosions. "Show me their weapons again," he ordered, settling into his command throne. The main screen flickered to life, displaying surveillance footage of human military bases. Zarthak watched with growing amusement as soldiers carried what looked like metal tubes. The intelligence division had cataloged everything: rifles that fired single projectiles, larger weapons they called machine guns that fired multiple projectiles rapidly, and various explosive devices that relied on chemical reactions rather than sophisticated energy manipulation. "Primitive beyond belief," muttered General Vextor, the Korthani military strategist whose species had mastered energy weapons before humans had discovered fire. "Look at those clumsy metal contraptions. Our personal shields can deflect their projectiles effortlessly. Our armor plating laughs at their explosive shells." The bridge erupted in what could charitably be called laughter from a dozen different species. The Zephyrians trilled, the Moltecs gurgled, and the silicon-based Crystallians chimed like wind bells. Even the usually serious ethereal observers floating near the ceiling pulsed with amused colors. Zarthak had commanded fleets in the Andromedian Wars, where enemies wielded weapons that could slice through dimensions. He had faced the Plasma Collective, whose warriors carried sunfire in their hands. The idea that these humans thought their gunpowder toys could stand against the might of the Galactic Empire was almost insulting. "Admiral," Communications Officer Yelna announced, her tentacles dancing across her console, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. The human leadership wishes to negotiate." "Put them through," Zarthak commanded, straightening in his throne. "This would be amusing." The screen shimmered, revealing a middle-aged human male in what appeared to be a military uniform covered in colorful ribbons. Behind him stood other humans, their faces grim but not showing the terror Zarthak expected. "I am General Marcus Thompson, representing Earth's United Defense Command," the human said, his voice steady. "You have entered our solar system with hostile intent. We demand you withdraw immediately." The bridge fell silent for a moment before erupting in laughter again. Zarthak wiped moisture from his primary eyes, a sign of extreme amusement in his species. "Human," he began, his voice dripping with condescension. "I am Admiral Zarthak of the 47th Conquest Fleet. Your species is hereby ordered to surrender unconditionally to the Galactic Empire. Resistance is not only futile, but laughably inadequate." General Thompson's expression didn't change. "We decline your offer." "Offer?" Zarthak's scales darkened with irritation. "This is not an offer, primitive creature. We have studied your weapons, chemical explosives and metal projectiles. We conquered civilizations with plasma technology that could melt your guns before you could fire them. Our personal shields make your bullets bounce off like raindrops." "You seem very confident in your intelligence reports," Thompson replied calmly. Of course we are confident. General Vextor leaned into view. We have recordings of your largest weapons in action. These machine guns that fire perhaps a few hundred rounds per minute? Our armor can withstand direct hits from starship cannons. Your explosive shells might as well be firecrackers. Thompson nodded slowly. I see. And you believe this intelligence is complete? What more could there be? Zarthak laughed again. We have cataloged every weapon in your arsenal. Rifles, machine guns, artillery, rockets, even your nuclear devices. All primitive, all chemical-based, all utterly inadequate against modern galactic technology. Admiral, Thompson said quietly, you might want to review your intelligence more carefully. Enough! Zarthak rose from his throne. You bore me, human. We grant you 1 solar cycle to consider surrender. After that, we will demonstrate why the Galactic Empire rules 200,000 worlds while you cling to 1. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in satisfied silence. Around Zarthak, his officers returned to their duties, already planning victory celebrations. The Admiral himself began composing his report to the High Command, describing what would surely be the shortest conquest in Imperial history. Sir, Intelligence Officer Mordek approached hesitantly. There was something odd about that human's demeanor. What do you mean? Zarthak's secondary arms gestured dismissively. He seemed unafraid. Usually, primitive species show terror when they see our fleet size. This General Thompson appeared almost relieved. Relief at knowing their suffering will be brief, no doubt. Zarthak waved the concern away. Prepare the ground forces. Tomorrow we show these humans why the galaxy bows before the Empire. Far below, on Earth's surface, in a bunker deep beneath the Swiss Alps, General Thompson removed his dress uniform and reached for combat fatigues. Around him, military personnel moved with practiced efficiency, implementing plans that had been decades in the making. How did they take the bait, sir? Asked Colonel Sarah Martinez, his chief of staff. Thompson allowed himself a small smile. Hook, line, and sinker. They think they know everything about our weapons capabilities. The deception worked? Perfectly. They've been watching our standard infantry exercises, our basic training scenarios, our parade ground demonstrations. Everything we wanted them to see. Thompson walked to a large map showing defensive positions across the globe. They have no idea about the real arsenal. Martinez nodded toward a sealed door marked with radiation warnings and multiple security symbols. The boys downstairs are asking if they can start the final preparations. Tell them to begin, Thompson ordered, and remind them, the galaxy is about to learn why humans have a saying, speak softly and carry a big stick. Sir, they're going to be in for quite a surprise when they meet Bertha's sisters. Thompson's smile widened. The aliens had cataloged machine guns, though the first wave of Galactic Empire troops descended through Earth's atmosphere like a meteor shower of destruction. Admiral Zarthak watched from orbit with satisfaction as 10,000 drop pods screamed toward major population centers. Each pod contained a squad of elite soldiers equipped with plasma rifles, energy shields, and armor that had proven effective against every known weapon in the galaxy. Landing zone secured, Admiral, reported Colonel Yexma, commanding the surface forces. Human resistance is exactly as predicted. They're firing their primitive projectile weapons at us. Our shields are holding perfectly. On the tactical display, Zarthak could see the engagement unfolding. Human soldiers with their crude rifles were indeed firing at the invasion force, their bullets sparking harmlessly off energy barriers that could stop plasma bolts. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Phase 2, Colonel. Begin the advance toward population centers. Acknowledged, Admiral. For the Empire. Below, Colonel Yexma emerged from his drop pod in the outskirts of what humans called New York City. Around him, his soldiers spread out in perfect formation, their plasma rifles ready. The humans had established defensive positions behind concrete barriers and metal obstacles. exactly like primitive species always did. "Look at them," laughed Sergeant Corvex, pointing at human soldiers crouched behind cover. "They're still trying to fight with those metal-throwing toys. Watch this." He raised his plasma rifle and fired a bolt that turned a section of concrete wall into molten slag. The humans behind it scattered, firing their weapons as they retreated. The bullets hit the Galactic Force's shields and bounced away harmlessly. "This is almost too easy," Yexma commented, advancing with his troops. "Intelligence was right. These weapons are completely ineffective." For the first hour, the invasion proceeded exactly as expected. Human forces fell back consistently, their conventional weapons proving utterly useless against galactic technology. Plasma bolts destroyed defensive positions, while human bullets accomplished nothing more than light shows against energy shields. Yexma was beginning to compose his victory report when his communications officer approached urgently. "Sir? We're receiving reports from other landing zones. Something's happening." "What do you mean, something?" "The humans are changing their tactics. They're pulling back to secondary positions." Yexma frowned. Tactical retreats were normal, but something about this felt different. The humans weren't retreating in panic or disorder. They were moving with purpose, like they were following a predetermined plan. "Sir," another soldier called out, "movement ahead." Through the smoke and debris, a new line of human defensive positions became visible. But these didn't look like the hasty fortifications they had been encountering. These were serious bunkers, built into hillsides and reinforced with materials that didn't look quite right. "What are those structures made of?" Yexma asked his technical specialist. "Scanning now." "Sir, that's not standard concrete or steel. The density readings are off the charts. Whatever they built those bunkers from, it's incredibly dense and heat-resistant." "Irrelevant," Yexma declared. "No material can withstand sustained plasma bombardment. Advance and destroy those positions." His forces moved forward confidently, plasma rifles charging for maximum power. As they approached the human bunkers, Yexma noticed something odd. There were no visible weapon ports or firing slits. The structures looked almost like solid blocks. Then, the bunkers opened. What emerged from those reinforced positions wasn't the small handheld weapons they had been fighting. These were massive mechanical constructions that required multiple humans to operate, fed by long belts of ammunition that seemed to stretch back into the depths of the bunkers. "What are those devices?" someone asked over the communication network. Yexma was about to dismiss them as just larger versions of the same primitive technology when the weapons opened fire. The sound was indescribable. Not the gentle pop-pop-pop of the rifles they had been facing, but a continuous roar like thunder that never stopped. The air filled with a solid stream of projectiles moving so fast they were barely visible. "Shields holding," reported Yexma, though he noticed the energy barriers were flickering more than usual. "Maintain advance." But then something impossible happened. The projectiles didn't just bounce off the shields, they began punching through them. "That's not possible," Sergeant Corvex shouted over the deafening noise. "These are just larger bullet throwers!" The technical specialist's voice cracked with disbelief. "Sir, these projectiles are moving at over 4,000 feet per second. The kinetic energy is enormous, and the rate of fire. I'm reading over 6,000 rounds per minute from each weapon." "Impossible. No chemical propellant can achieve those velocities." "Sir, I'm detecting multiple chemical signatures. These aren't using simple gunpowder. There are at least 6 different propellant compounds working in sequence, and the projectiles themselves, they're not simple lead bullets. These are composite armor-piercing rounds with depleted uranium cores." Yexma watched in growing horror as the impossible became reality. The continuous stream of hypersonic projectiles was overwhelming their shields through sheer volume and velocity. Where human weapons had been ineffective minutes before, these monsters were cutting through Galactic Empire forces like a harvesting blade through grain. "Fall back! Establish new positions," he ordered, but the retreat was already beginning. On the orbital command ship, Admiral Zarthak stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The neat, organized advance of his ground forces had suddenly become chaotic retreat symbols scattered across the map. "What is happening down there?" he demanded. "Admiral," Communications Officer Yelna's voice shook. "We're receiving casualty reports from all landing zones. The humans have deployed weapons we've never seen before. Our forces are requesting immediate orbital bombardment support." "What weapons? They only have chemical projectile throwers." "Sir, according to the reports, these new weapons are firing projectiles at velocities approaching low-level energy weapons. The rate of fire is beyond anything in our databases. And, sir, they're not just defeating our shields, they're completely destroying them." Zarthak's scales turned the deep purple of absolute rage. "Show me!" The main screen switched to a live feed from Colonel Yexma's position. What Zarthak saw defied everything he understood about primitive technology. The human weapons were continuous streams of destruction, creating walls of projectiles so dense they looked like solid barriers of death. Galactic Empire soldiers, who had conquered civilizations across the galaxy, were being cut down by what appeared to be massively enhanced versions of the primitive weapons they had been mocking hours earlier. "How is this possible?" General Vextor whispered. "Our intelligence was complete. We cataloged every human weapon." "Apparently not," Intelligence Officer Mordek said quietly. "Admiral, I'm analyzing the projectiles from orbital sensors. These rounds are using multi-stage chemical propulsion with magnetic acceleration. The humans have somehow combined their chemical technology with electromagnetic principles we didn't expect them to understand." "And the rate of fire?" Zarthak asked numbly. "Over 6,000 rounds per minute per weapon, sir." "But that's not the worst part. Our surveillance is detecting movement at other human defensive positions. These massive weapons are emerging from hidden emplacements across all major continents. Admiral, I think we've been deliberately shown only their smallest capabilities." On Earth, General Thompson stood in his command center, watching the real-time reports from defensive positions worldwide. The first phase of the counterattack was proceeding exactly as planned. "Bertha performed beautifully in New York," Colonel Martinez reported. "The aliens had no idea what hit them." "What about the other positions?" "Moscow's Big Ivan is online and engaging." Tokyo's Thunder Admiral Zarthak stood before the holographic displays showing the catastrophic failure of the ground invasion. His scales had shifted to the deep black of extreme stress, and his forearms trembled with barely controlled fury. Around him, the bridge crew worked in tense silence, processing reports that defied everything they understood about warfare. "Orbital bombardment is our only option," he declared, his voice carrying the edge of desperation. "These humans may have surprised us with their enhanced projectile weapons, but they cannot defend against Starship-grade plasma cannons." General Vextor, his confidence thoroughly shattered, nodded reluctantly. "The bombardment will eliminate their defensive positions. No ground-based weapon can reach our ships." "Begin targeting major population centers," Zarthak commanded. "We'll break their spirit by destroying their cities." As the massive cannons of the orbital fleet swiveled toward Earth, Admiral Zarthak allowed himself a moment of restored confidence. Whatever tricks the humans had played with their primitive technology, they were still bound to their planet's surface. Orbital supremacy remained the Empire's greatest advantage. "Charging primary weapons," Weapons Officer Kyltar announced. "Target locked on the human city designated Washington. Ready to fire on your command." "Fire," Zarthak ordered. The brilliant lance of plasma erupted from the flagship's main cannon, streaking through space toward the unsuspecting city below. For a moment, Zarthak savored the approaching victory. Then something impossible happened. The plasma bolt simply vanished. "What happened to our shot?" Zarthak demanded. "Unknown, Admiral. The plasma beam just disappeared approximately 50 kilometers above the planet's surface." "Impossible! Check your targeting systems!" "Systems are functioning perfectly, sir. Firing again." The second plasma bolt met the same fate, winking out of existence as if it had struck some invisible barrier. Around the fleet, other ships reported identical results. Every orbital bombardment attempt simply vanished before reaching the planet's surface. "Admiral," Sensors Officer Dexerin's voice cracked with strain, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures emerging from the planet's surface. Multiple locations are powering up simultaneously." "Show me!" The tactical display shifted to show Earth from orbit, and what Zarthak saw made his primary heart skip several beats. Across all major continents, enormous structures were rising from the ground like mechanical mountains awakening from sleep. These weren't the bunker-mounted weapons that had destroyed his ground forces. These were constructions so massive they dwarfed entire cities. "What are those things?" General Vextor whispered. Before anyone could answer, the structures opened fire. What emerged wasn't the stream of small projectiles they had encountered on the surface. These weapons fired projectiles the size of starfighters, each one accelerated to velocities that sensors could barely track. The massive bullets screamed through space toward the Galactic fleet, and for the first time in his career, Admiral Zarthak realized he was facing something completely beyond his experience. "Evasive maneuvers!" he shouted, but the projectiles were already among them. The first round struck the cruiser, Stellar Dominance amidships. Zarthak expected to see the ship's shields flare and absorb the impact. Instead, the projectile punched through the shields as if they weren't there, pierced the hull armor like paper, and exited the other side in a spray of molten metal and debris. The cruiser, 1,000 meters of cutting-edge military technology, simply came apart in the middle. "Shields ineffective!" someone screamed over the communication network. "The projectiles are too massive and too fast." "How is this possible?" Zarthak demanded. "These are still chemical weapons." "Admiral," Intelligence Officer Mordek's voice carried pure terror, "I'm analyzing the projectiles. These aren't simple bullets. They're multi-stage kinetic penetrators using sequential chemical charges, magnetic acceleration, and what appears to be gravitational field manipulation. The humans have somehow created hybrid weapons that combine their chemical technology with physics we thought they didn't understand." Another salvo from the planet tore through the fleet. The battleship Iron Conqueror took a direct hit that sheared off its entire forward section. The destroyer, Swift Death, was struck by 3 rounds simultaneously and disappeared in a cloud of expanding plasma. "How many of these weapons do they have?" Zarthak shouted. "Detecting at least 50 major installations worldwide, Admiral. But, sir, that's not the worst part. I'm reading massive power buildups at 12 locations. Whatever they're preparing to fire next is orders of magnitude larger than what's already shooting at us." On Earth's surface, the Continental Defense Grid was finally revealing its true purpose. Hidden beneath major mountain ranges, the 12 massive installations represented humanity's ultimate expression of the machine gun concept. Where the surface weapons fired projectiles the size of starfighters, these titans prepared to launch rounds the size of skyscrapers. "Big Bertha was just the appetizer," General Thompson said, watching the orbital battle from his command center. "Now they get to meet her big sisters." "Sir, all 12 Continental defense positions report ready to fire," Colonel Martinez announced. "The Himalayas installation has target lock on their flagship." "Weapons free," Thompson ordered quietly. "Show them what happens when humans really get serious about kinetic weapons." The Himalayas defense platform fired first. The projectile it launched was a masterwork of human engineering, a 500-meter-long kinetic penetrator containing enough chemical propellant to power a small city, accelerated through a magnetic tunnel that ran through the entire mountain range. the round achieved velocities that challenged the fundamental limits of matter acceleration, carrying kinetic energy equivalent to a small star's output. Admiral Zarthak watched his flagship's tactical display as sensors detected the incoming projectile. For a moment, his mind refused to process what he was seeing. The round was so large and moving so fast that it generated its own gravitational field, warping space around it as it climbed toward the fleet. "All power to shields," he commanded desperately. "Maximum defensive!" The projectile struck the Dominator's will. Like the fist of an angry god, the flagship's shields, designed to withstand the concentrated fire of entire battle fleets, lasted exactly 1 nanosecond before collapsing. The hull armor, forged from materials harvested from neutron stars, proved as effective as tissue paper. The round punched through the ship's entire 2-kilometer length and continued into space beyond, carrying half the vessel's mass with it. Admiral Zarthak had just enough time to realize that his species' fundamental assumptions about primitive technology had been catastrophically wrong before the flagship's reactor containment failed and erased him from existence. Across the solar system, the surviving ships of the Galactic fleet fled in panic as the remaining 11 continental defense platforms opened fire. The rounds chased the fleeing vessels like guided meteors, each impact removing another ship from existence with mechanical precision. Within 6 hours, the most powerful invasion fleet in Galactic Empire history had been reduced to scattered debris and a handful of courier ships, fleeing toward the edge of the solar system with news of the impossible defeat. On Earth, General Thompson stood on the observation deck of the Himalayas installation, watching the last enemy ships disappear into hyperspace. Around him, the mountain hummed with the power of humanity's greatest achievement, the marriage of simple kinetic principles with engineering so advanced it bordered on magic. "Think they'll be back?" Colonel Martinez asked. Thompson smiled grimly. "Eventually, but when they do return, they'll bring their entire fleet, and they'll have studied our weapons. Will we be ready? We've got time to build Bertha's grandmother, the really big gun." Thompson gestured toward sealed blueprints marked with warnings in 17 languages. "The one that fires moons." Across the galaxy, the surviving ships carried news that would shake the Empire to its foundations. A primitive species on a backwater world had somehow turned basic kinetic weapons into tools of impossible destruction. The intelligence reports spoke of human machine guns that fired projectiles larger than starships, of chemical weapons that achieved energy outputs rivaling stellar engines. The Galactic Empire, which had conquered 200,000 worlds through technological superiority, suddenly faced a terrifying new question. If humans could do this with machine guns, what else were they hiding? Deep in classified bunkers across Earth, that question was already being answered as humanity's greatest minds worked on projects that would redefine warfare itself. The galaxy had made the mistake of judging human potential by human restraint. Now they would learn why the most dangerous words in any language were, "Hold my beer and watch this." The age of human expansion was about to begin, and it would be built on the simple principle that had always driven human innovation. There was no such thing as a weapon that couldn't be made bigger, faster, and more efficient. The Galactic Empire had mocked human machine guns as primitive toys. They were about to discover that when humans perfected something, they perfected it beyond all reason and sanity. The stars belonged to whoever could reach them, and humans had just proven they had the biggest guns. Reagan is chewing through their eastern flank. The London position just activated Queen's Wrath. Martinez paused, consulting her tablet. "Sir, the enemy forces are in full retreat at every engagement site." Thompson nodded with satisfaction. "And they still haven't seen the really big guns. Should we reveal the continental defense grid?" "Not yet. Let them think they understand our capabilities now. When they regroup and try orbital bombardment, They'll learn what happens when humans really get serious about machine gun design. Above them, Admiral Zarthak was indeed planning orbital bombardment, convinced that superior firepower from space would end this impossible situation. He had no idea that hidden beneath Earth's surface, weapons were powering up that would redefine what humans meant by heavy machine gun, fired a few hundred rounds per minute. They had no concept of what human engineering could accomplish when necessity drove innovation to its absolute limits. In hidden facilities across Earth, weapons that existed in no public record hummed to life, systems that redefined what chemical propulsion and metallurgy could achieve. The Galactic Empire ruled through technological superiority and fear. They had never encountered a species that specialized in making simple concepts work beyond all reasonable expectations. They were about to learn that humans didn't just use machine guns. Humans had perfected machine guns to a degree that bordered on artistry. As night fell over Earth, the first phase of humanity's greatest deception neared its end. The aliens believed they understood human capabilities. Tomorrow, they would discover the difference between what humans showed the galaxy and what humans built for war.